Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures, Daily Dose of Nature. Today's presentation, Reef Connections, How Ocean Life Thrives, is brought to you by NatHab Expedition Leader, Melissa Silva. Melissa is a marine biologist who has been guiding nature adventures in Mexico since 2012 and recently joined NatHab's team in the Central Highlands to lead monarch butterfly migration expeditions. She focused part of her studies on nudibranchs and is currently working on her master's thesis on seahorse mating behavior. Based in Puerto Vallarta, Melissa combines her marine biology expertise with broader naturalist knowledge to share wildlife conservation through nature encounters with travelers around the world. Thank you, Melissa, for being here with us today. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you for that lovely presentation. Well, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. As Rob already mentioned, I'm a marine biologist. So pretty much talking about this topic is for me like being in the water, like a fish in the ocean. This is a photo of me actually in Puerto Vallarta. The background is Los Arcos Marine Park, and it's not the only place where I've encountered the sea life, and specifically the reef areas. These photos, one taken in the Caribbean side of Mexico in Puerto Morelos. You can see at the bottom there a reef formation, and the other one, this is a rocky bottom covered with some benthic organisms, algae, sponges, the corals, and that was taken in Puerto Vallarta in the Pacific coast of Mexico. So with this example, you can see I've been in touch with these organisms, with this environment and ecosystem for many years of my life. So when we think or say the word reef, we immediately think of something like this, right? I'm sure that you have been somewhere where you see these beautiful warm waters, clear waters, and then this colorful area, pretty much like a mosaic or like a mat of different colors and textures and shapes. Pretty much that would be one of the reefs we have in the world. These are the most popular. You can see even for movies, when we have the Finding Nemo movie, pretty much everything took place in the Great Barrier Reef of Australia. So yes, this is part of what a reef is. But to be very specific, and just to keep it like in at the definition of reef, this is a ridge of material that is at the surface of the ocean or near, like just below the surface of the ocean. This photo here, as you can see, all of this breaking area, the area where you see the foam of the waves, all the breaking point here, it's the reef edge in Puerto Morelos in the Caribbean, Mexican Caribbean. So this would be the reef, this ridge of material that is over there. But if we go into the ecological definition of a reef, is an underwater ecosystem. This underwater ecosystem provides everything for marine life: shelter, food, breeding areas, and for humans, for example, or for terrestrial animals, provides coastal protection as well, among many other ecological services that we have from the reefs. So these three photos you see here, they are very different among them because we have very different types of reefs. Once again, if we go back to the very simple definition of what a reef is, this reef of material can be made of different stuff. We call that a substrate. The substrate is pretty much the foundation, the baseline of the ecosystem. I made this diagram to try to set it like the easiest way. We have pretty much two different substrates, the natural and the artificials. The artificials are all the human-made substrates. The natural ones, as its name says, they come from nature. So why is it so important to have this definition well established, or this is the topic in our minds? Because most of the benthic organisms, most of the marine organisms, hardly go on the ground, on the floor of the ocean, without a solid structure to attach to. So if we just have a sandy area, like in this ridge, in a sandy reef, we do have, it's very likely that there's less biodiversity, that there is less presence of fish, of invertebrates on that area than, on the other hand, for example, a rocky area. Rocks can have a little bit more diversity, let's say, than a sandy area. Why? Because we already have the foundations, we already have something solid that will keep these organisms safe and attached to the ground, to the seabed. Okay. So let me tell you about the artificial reefs, because as I established here on the diagram, they can be intentional or unintentional. I really didn't find like a specific or a technical, widely used way of define the different artificial reefs. So we could divide them, those human-made structures that are there on purpose for a reason, and other structures that are there without us wanting those structures being there. So as I mentioned, the artificial reefs are this underwater structure made by the humans, and they mimic usually a natural reef. See, they mimic these other sandy bottoms, rocky bottoms, or biological foundations that we can find all around the world in natural areas. So here, for example, we have these sunken ships, piers, buoys, for example, a set of buoys floating to delimit an area. They can be artificial reefs. This one here, for example, these are the pillars of a pier in Bonaire. Salty Pier is the name of it. I was mesmerized, I think is the word, completely to see the photos of these divers, because it's so complex. The ecosystem that we have in this artificial area is so complex, but well, because it's right next to the Caribbean reefs that are naturally there, that naturally are very complex. But just look at the colors of the sponges of this coral here. We can also have reefs made out of concrete, like these bricks. You can see, is this one here is made out of rocks that were around the area. So as you can see, anything that humans put in the ocean nearby an area where there's already an ecosystem, a reef ecosystem established, can become an artificial reef. Sometimes it's not so good, because a lot of the materials that the accidental reefs are made of can be pollutants, metals, even oil, for example. If we have a shipwreck and then all the oil goes out there, is the paints. So all of that can damage. The thing here is that when an artificial reef is done in a right way, it provides a very good habitat and is the base for a complex ecosystem to grow. See, so here you can see a series of photos. On day one, when they set the artificial reef here, a few fish you can see on the background of the photo, a few fish checking out the space. Only 9 months after, you already see colonization from algae, from soft corals. I can see some sponges here in red, and at least three different, I see 1, 2, 3 different species of fish in the area. 9 months after they set those structures in the area. 1 year and a half, you can see it's already a well-established ecosystem. We see corals, elkhorn corals, and 1, 2, Well, I can only see two different species of fish, but this one here, the black one on the background, is not present on neither of the other photos. So you can see how complex it becomes in year and a half only. Okay, I won't go deeper on this specific topics. There are many studies. I wanted to mention these two because I think they are very interesting. One second, I have my notes here. Here, for example, on the article on the top, that they check these artificial reefs on the Yellow Sea, they notice that the community structure on the artificial reef was very similar, was mimicking the natural habitat, the natural reef that was close to it, the closest one. So that means that, yeah, it is barren at the very moment you place it, but once it is settled there and the material is safe for the organisms that live nearby, they immediately colonize and they use the artificial reef the same way they will use the natural one. On the the article that is here on the bottom of your screen, seagrass production around artificial reefs resistant to human stressors. What they were checking over there is that in human altered environments, specifically the seagrass beds, we find those seagrass beds, for example, in Florida. A lot of them are in Florida, on the Caribbean, in Mexican Caribbean, and usually in shallow areas nearby reef communities, closer to the shore. We can find, for example, the manatees living there. Sea turtles, the green turtle is one of the most important inhabitants of seagrass areas, and seahorses. We can find the seahorses mostly on seagrass areas here, at least here in Mexico. Well, so these researchers noticed that the seagrass that was affected by human activities, when you placed an artificial reef in or around the seagrass environment, the presence of fish in the artificial reef helped the seagrass, because when they were pooping, they were giving nutrients to the seagrass. When they were eating the other algae or other seagrass that was present, or sponges, they were eliminating competitors for the resources, you say the light or the nutrients in the water. So when you add all this diversity into the area, the seagrass actually became healthier and, as it says, more resistant to the stress that human activity produces. So, well, you can take a screenshot of this, check the articles. They are very interesting. Another thing that the artificial reefs can do is they protect coastlines. The natural reefs do the same. I will talk about that in a moment. They control beach erosion, and they add recreation value to the places where they are placed. Here is an example that I really love, because they had these two photos 20 years apart of a comparative scene in Queensland. It's Golden Beach, I think, if I remember. The artificial reef is named Narrow Neck, and they said that one, they place it in order to have both the beach with less erosion. As you can see on the top image of the beach, we have a lot of erosion. You can actually see a lot of rocks here, placed by the people living on the beach to prevent the waves taking the sand. With the reef, we have all the sand already, and some sand dunes already covering the place, protecting the land inside. And they try to do that as well to form a surfing area. It's something super interesting. I will give you some other sources where you can check later, but this specifically artificial reefs for surfing purposes is something very popular, and done well, it gives you, I like to surf, and it gives you perfect surfing waves according to what the technique needs. So if you need a specific wave for a specific competition with a specific length and formation, you can create a reef to make that wave. So it's another topic that we can explore in a different webinar, but this is something very, very, very interesting. Well, now the natural reefs, we already checked the artificial a little bit. Well, what about the natural reefs that are, of course, the most popular and the most common and the most abundant of in nature? As I mentioned previously, it depends on the substrate, the name that we give to these reefs. We can say it's a rocky reef, it's a sandy reef, or usually I found it as a coral reef, but it's not only about corals, it's also a biological substrate reef. Well, rocky, I think it doesn't need much explanation. It's just the rocks, and then the benthonic animals, the benthic organisms come. Here we have an example of, we have corals, we have sea urchins, and we see some damselfish on the area. Well, somewhere there, I've been there. That's Islas Marietas in Puerto Vallarta again. We have a lot of sponges, a lot of gorgonians, that is another type of corals. So pretty much we have a ¿cómo se llama? Diverse ecosystem, but the base, the foundation are the rocks that were there previously. So those rocks can be rocks that were outside of the water for years or thousands of years. With the rise of the sea level, they came under the water and then they were colonized. Pretty much that's one way of having a rocky reef. The sandy reefs, I think it's also very easy to understand. We have sand areas. Here, for example, the sand case that we have in Florida. I saw some very particular in Philippines and in China. So it's pretty much the sand bar, and then some polyps on the corals or some sponges found a perfect area with the perfect the current conditions and sun and the nutrients, and they just started growing there. So we have, as you can see here, we have the organisms, we have the living structure growing from the sand. You can see through the sand. So that would be like the sandy reef. And then the biological reefs, those are many different. Here, this photo specifically, I wanted to exemplify an oyster bed. So believe it or not, oysters can form reefs. Why? Because if they get all together, they create, remember the definition, they create a ridge that is on the surface or near the surface of the ocean. See? So that's what we have here in this oyster reef. We have the sponge reefs. We have oyster, sponge, and then we have the most popular and the one we think of when we say the reefs, the coral reefs. Why it is so important, or why it has so much why when we think about reefs, we think about coral reefs? Well, because despite being only 1% of Earth's surface, so in total, all the reefs are only 1% of the Earth's surface, they have 25% more or less of all the marine life, at least in one of their life stages. So for example, they do have seahorses, they have the sea turtles. We can find dolphins, mammals associated to coral reefs. We can have sharks. We can have even like marine birds associated to reefs, because they go there and they fish, they hunt it from the reef area, around the reef area. So that's why they are so important and they are so popular, and they are the thing that we associate with reefs when we talk about them. Something that I liked was this phrase that I found, the three-dimensional habitat. See, so we have the coral reef, but we have a three-dimensional area where we can inhabit if we were marine animals. The marine animals can live inside the coral. There are worms, shrimps, crabs, annelids, echinoderms that live inside the coral structure. They dig holes. Sometimes they find a dead area and then they just make their home there. Sometimes they open a hole in the living tissue and then they live inside. Then we have the fish, of course, that they are just like swimming around on there a little bit, hiding in the place. And well, of course, we have all over environment around the coral reef that I will mention in this moment. Before that, I wanted to show you this diagram because I think it's important just to have in mind that there are different shapes in which the reefs, the coral reefs mostly, are distributed. Mostly near the shore. Some of them are oceanic, as you can see on this bottom diagram. But basically, it's like kind of three of them. It's the Phrygian reef that is usually just a line along the coast, the barrier reef that is with a distance between the main area, the main land, to put it on a way. So in the center, in the middle, we will have like a lagoon or an estuarine area between the reef and the mainland. And then we have patches or atolls. That's something also very, very popular. Atolls that they used to be a barrier reef, but through the years with the erosion and the sea level that is rising or going down, so all the different movements on Earth, they separate, they create these patches of reef, but they are still like in this circular island-like formation of reefs. So what, in terms of biology, what will make a reef? So we have, you see the whole stuff. I was listening to a TED talk and they said, well, the coral is more than a slimy rock. So when you see the coral, you think of a rock. You see this hard stuff that barely moves or doesn't move at all if you don't see. And then if you pay attention, you see the little tiny mini things living here. So these are polyps, coral polyps, and they are related to the anemones, to the anemones, to the jellyfish. They are cnidarians. So just like anemones and jellyfish, they have stinging cells. They sting. So actually, there are some corals that are called fire coral because of obvious reasons. When you touch them, it really like burn your skin. So this tiny polyp, this tiny polyp in other areas, they said you can consider them animals, vegetables, and even minerals. Why? Well, because the polyp has inside the body a plant, an algae. It's called a zooxanthella. Actually, I have to be very honest, it's the first time I heard and read the name in English because I usually just say it in Spanish, zooxanthella. So like very plain, zooxanthella. So the zooxanthella, it's a microscopic algae that is symbiotic to the coral polyp. This means that they cannot live without each other. In some species, most of the species, like 90% of the coral species. The coral will provide to the zooxanthella, that is photosynthetic, the first producer, will provide carbon dioxide, phosphorus, and nitrogen, that are the basic stuff a plant or a vegetable needs to make the photosynthesis. On the other hand, the zooxanthella will provide the polyp with oxygen, that is an animal, they need oxygen. The oxygen, the sugars, and the fats that the polyp needs to be growing, okay? I just love this diagram because here we can see the little tiny polyps, you can see so beautiful, and then you can see the zooxanthella also. If you see the measurement is the scale, 70 micros. 70 micros is the size of this scale. So they are super tiny, as you can see. They actually live inside the cells of the polyp. Here, this is a a tissue segment of the polyps, having on the top of it the seawater, the external environment, and having on the bottom the skeleton, the reef that they are forming. We have the ectoderms, we have the endoderms. At the very bottom, very inside of the endoderm, we have some specialized cells that produce the calcium carbonate that creates the reef. This, the calcidodermis. So you can see all these structure, how they are established in order to have the zooxanthella get some protection from the ectoderm, from the oral ectoderm, and then it's right there on the surface where they can, because the polyps are clear, so the zooxanthella can get the sunlight to make the photosynthesis, but then release all the nutrients into the endoderm, into the growing cells of the polyps. See, so I really like this one. Bueno, I mentioned the calcium carbonate. I mentioned they have these specialized cells that create the reef, but not all the corals, not all the species of corals produce calcium carbonate to create these huge reefs, these huge areas. Some of them are called soft corals, and then the ones that do have the calcium carbonate are the hard corals. Something that I found very interesting is that the polyps differ. The polyps of soft corals have, in general, 8 or multiples of 8 tentacles. The polyps on hard corals will have 6 or multiples of 6 the tentacles, and they are a little bit more stiff. See? A couple of examples of these is the lettuce coral and the gorgonian corals. So the fan coral is a coral, is not an algae, but they are so soft. They are very, very flexible. Okay, so bueno, that would be these two examples. Once again, when we think about coral reefs and we think about corals, we tend to think of Caribbean, tropical areas, a lot of sun, a lot of heat, humidity. Well, yes, mostly, but we also have deep water corals, deep water reefs, like with actual coral polyps. As you can see here on the left, this is from the North Sea, as a photo from the North Sea. And you might think it is a bleach coral. It's a coral that is sick, that is dead, but it's not true. It's just that they don't have the zooxanthella as the tropical or surface corals have. Okay, so they do have some other microorganisms that are symbiotic too. You can see there are some sponges in between. So they use different techniques or different adaptations to get the nutrients they need in order to survive in these deep water areas. So why reefs are so important? Why coral reefs specifically are so important? For local economies, for to get food and medicine from there, to help communities that live by the area. They are a biodiversity hotspot, and they offer coastal protection to land areas. See? So, bueno, here is just like an introduction of that. I want to go deep on the specifics. And this is so cool because, I mean, I've been in this situation. I've seen the degradation in some areas and the aftermath of that, the affectations that we have. Specifically, for example, I can think of Cozumel, Isla Mujeres, Cancun. For many years, there was no a good planification. There was no a respectful way of building the areas. So they destroy mangrove areas, they destroy coral areas in order to have like these very nice all-inclusive resorts. When we have the hurricanes, let me remember the name. I cannot remember if it was the Vilma or okay. I don't remember exactly which hurricane that was, but it was in the 90s. And excuse me, they realized that they had a lot of damage inland because of the loss of the mangroves and the reef. Oh, excuse me. I think that's it. Okay. So here, this is some information, some data I found about the protection that these reefs offer. A reef can stop 97% of the wave energy that goes into the shore. So just imagine having a storm wave, a hurricane wave coming through the land, but then it gets in the reef, through the reef, and then you just have 3% of that force, of that mass of energy. So that's the amount of energy that the reef absorbs. In wave 8, in the size of the wave, they can reduce 84% of the wave 8. So you can just imagine how important they are, how safe they keep these land areas. Another stuff that is why they are important, that I wanted to touch here, the topic, is that they are, I already mentioned, 25% of the marine biodiversity is associated to coral reefs. Why? Because they can be corridors, they can be a station area to join together two different ecosystems. Deep waters, I'm thinking, for example, squids. Squids like to be in deeper waters. They are not so benthonic, they are more like neritic. They like to swim away from the shore. But in a certain moment, they will need protection when they are when they are babies, when they are spawning, see, giving all the eggs outside, spawning. So when they need that, they have to come closer to areas where their fries, where their the larva stage is protected. What ecosystem gives that service? The coral reefs. ¿Qué más? Let me show you. Yeah, this photo. Definitely one photo worth more than 1,000 words. You can see all of these fish here that are almost, can you see the, I think you can see it. 1 second. Right here. All of these tiny, almost transparent fish, the silver ones, those are baby fish, fries. So when we have those fries in these massive numbers, of course they are target to many, many predators. Anything bigger than them will target. What they have to do is go into safe areas. You can call it the seagrass, in between the grass on the seabed. They can go in the roots of mangrove trees if they are closer to the coastline. But if they are closer to the neritic, to the pelagic zone of the ocean, open sea, they will come to the first ecosystem they can find, which is coral reef. Okay. I really like this infography because it tells you more what I've been telling you. So this fish is, I had to look for the name, black spotted grunt, the Plectorhynchus gaterinus. It's an African fish found associated to seagrass areas and reef areas. So when they are mature adults, they spawn in the seagrass area. They grow there. The juveniles are, you can see actually they mimic a little bit with the seagrass area. Once they grow, they go out to the coral reef that is close by the seagrass bed because they find food there, they find mating there, and well, they need more like area in order to gather more food and resources in general. After that, when they survive this outside world, they will come back and they will start the cycle again. The important thing here is that in this the medium moment in their life, when they come back to the reef, they are part of course, the food chain that is associated to the coral reef, but also of the fisheries that are associated to coral reefs. So we need to have, on the previous article that I mentioned, we need to have seagrass beds healthy in order to have a healthy black spotted runt population in the coral reef, not even on the seagrass bed, but in the coral reef. This is another article that I found, and this specific diagram, I found it very, very interesting because they were, this is pretty much a prediction of the sizes, both fish predators and prey, predator in red, prey in green. So this prediction says that if we have a degraded coral reef, a completely degraded, eroded, disappear, of course we will have more difference, or a wider difference or distance in between the sizes of predators and prey. I think it's very obvious because prey look for a shelter, for a place to hide from the predators until when they are bigger or big enough to not be eaten. So this is pretty much just the general description of that. This is the article if you want to check, because it has much more information. It tells you about the like in the whole community. I don't know if you can see the other diagram here. It tells you like about the whole community, how it will change through the degradation of the coral. Okay, in a scenario, almost imagine a scenario. In some places it's happening, unfortunately. Something also very interesting that I found about the importance of reefs, of coral reefs, is the relationship they have with sharks. We usually think of sharks as being like pelagic organisms all the time swimming, because if they don't swim, they don't get the water through the gills and they don't breathe. But what happens when they come near shore? They have to come near shore because, well, in a certain moment, they are babies. They are tiny sharks that are prey for other species. So here, for example, we have small species like this white-spotted bullhead shark. They are pretty much like the small species. They look for shelter to avoid predators in reefs, in coral reefs. So remember when I mentioned about the three-dimensional is the habitat? Well, these fish are taking advantage of that. They look the areas where they can hide, and they just wait until it's a safe moment to go out and keep swimming. When sharks approach reefs, for example, they can also hunt. They can also get food from other fish on the area. And they are, just like he says, they are messy eaters. So when they are eating, they are just like expelling food particles all over the place. Smaller fish will get the food from those messy eaters. And the polyps, the coral polyps, remember they are animals. They are part animals with the zoosantella inside them. They will feed on those particles as well. They can feed on tiny animals, on tiny crustaceans, or they can feed on these suspended particles on the water. A lot of the coral reef areas are, they have a cleaning station. That means that there are specialized organisms, either shrimps or fish, that will come and clean on other species and the body of other species. When you don't have hands or when you don't have fingers, it's very, very hard to scratch and to remove parasites or other organisms that get on your skin, on your body. So sea turtles, is the sharks here in this example, even marine mammals can go on there and use these cleaning stations to keep their skin healthy. Other species, for example, they control invasive species. I was thinking on the invasive lionfish that we have here in the Caribbean, in the Atlantic coast of the Americas. So the sharks can be something very helpful to predate on these invasive species. So that's why we need them to come to the coral reefs. And of course, well, as I said, these are nursery areas. Baby sharks will come and find refuge. They find shelter and protection from the coral reefs. Bueno, population regulating the population health, and once again the nutrient cycling. This the same as with those artificial reefs that are associated to the seagrass beds. The poop of all these organisms will add important nutrients to the coral reef. But of course, they are facing threats. I'm pretty sure you know about those. I will just go very quickly over this. Um, Overpopulation, when we have more people going closer to reef areas on the shore, of course. There are overfishing, there's pollution, there's damage to the coral structure itself. So well, that would be one of those. And the other problem that they are facing now is the coral bleaching. Coral bleaching is a multifactorial event, because it's not only that the temperature of the ocean is rising, is not only the acidification, is not only pollution, but a mix of all of those. Just imagine, pretty much is when we humans, we have these very bad luck days, and then it seems that you are getting better on your luck, and something, I don't know, you lose your wallet, and then you find some money, but it turns out that it's a fake bill. I don't know, something like one a bad stuff after another happening to you. So what happens with you? You feel bad. You get, maybe you get depressed. Maybe you get with your happiness very low. So that happens to the coral when it's all of these stress factors are affecting them. The only way, or the only response that they have, they cannot move. They are sessile. The only thing they can do is they expel the zooxanthella, and they get white. That's why when we have that's when we have the bleaching. So when they expel the zooxanthella, they have less nutrients, and then if we have pollutants, they get sick, and then they are susceptible to pathogens. So I don't know if you can notice all the links, all the chain that is going together here. So well, of course, we know we have those problems here. What can we do? What can we do? There are, I don't want to go deeper on this, because there are many resources on internet, on books, even on TED talks, conventions on what to do to protect and to prevent the death of coral reefs, or coral polyps. Here, I just wanted to go very deeply, very quickly, sorry, in this, that there are marine protected areas that are being created and managed in an effective way. So we are doing that in Mexico, in North America, actually, as well. I read a lot about some areas in the Florida Peninsula. Of course, on all this Indo Pacific and South Asia area, where we have like the highest diversity of corals. They have a lot of programs now running for protection, for, we call it reforestation of coral patches. We are also, in the world, we are regulating fishing areas associated to corals. So nowadays you cannot have these the troll nets, I think it's the ones that are dragging nets. You cannot have them. They are banned near the coral areas. You can only have like artisanal fisheries or sport fishing nearby the coral areas. Research and monitoring of coral reef health. There are some efforts to reduce the pollution, either the one that is directly on the ocean or the one that comes from land. So there are a lot of stuff that are going on nowadays to protect the coral reefs. So I wanted to show you this again, just for you to remember why they are important and how they connect with everything, not only the ocean, but also the land. And what I wanted to show you too is, once again, some resources to learn more and to just to see what you can do from home, or even if you live in the mountains, away from the coral area. NatHab has this article. So the artificial reefs, they are helping the ocean, or is junk? It's a very interesting one. It makes you think. In the NOAA website, we have a whole area for corals only, and here is where you can have the protection efforts, the conservation efforts, the different environments. Here you can read more about the deep water corals, and well, just like any species, basically you can read about any species of coral and how the coral reefs in the US are going now. There's the status, the health status. I found this other association, Ocean Rescue Alliance. It works pretty much mostly on the US, but they have some partnerships with people here in Mexico and in, I don't remember if Africa or India. And then this is the one I talk about, the artificial reefs for surfing, coastalmanagement.com. So this is something very cool. If you like surfing, even if you don't like surfing, if you want to learn more about the artificial reefs and why they are important for many reasons, take a look on this. It's very, very cool. Pretty much that's it. I think we still have some time for the questions. Thank you very much, Rob. Back to you.
Okay, Melissa, thank you so much. So before we dive into the questions section, I would like to remind everyone that if you do have questions, please go to the upper right-hand corner of your screen and click on those 3 lines. That'll open up the menu, and you can go ahead and click on questions and put them in there. So let's get to some questions. So is the Mexican government requiring resorts to replant the mangroves?
Yes, actually, of course, there are more, how do you say that, enforcement of the laws to protect the mangroves that we already have. But the resorts that were damaged in those hurricanes, they noticed they had to do something. So since they are so close to the beach, they couldn't plant mangrove specifically, but they are restoring the sand dunes. So we have a specific vegetation for the sand dunes. They are doing that, and then on the new spots, they are leaving some meters of mangrove between the resort and the actual beach to prevent the future damage on the storms.
Gotcha, thank you. So let me ask you this. Are chemical sunscreens, are they going to be banned near coral reefs? And is there any science that supports that they do actually affect them?
Yeah, the commercial the commercial sunscreens, they have specific chemicals that affect the polyps, the coral polyps. There are many brands now that have titanium oxidum or something like that, something that is pretty much a physical barrier on your skin, and it stays on your skin. It doesn't go to the water. So those are the sunscreens that we need to look for. See, so pretty much is the ones that gives you all the white color, like you have chalk on it. But yeah, there are several scientific studies that really gives you the proof of how harmful they are, because it makes the polyp sick. The chemicals that these other sunscreens have make the polyp sick. So once again, it's another stress factor that can lead into coral bleaching.
Gotcha. Thank you for addressing that. So let me ask you this. We're looking at this picture here. It looks like a mermaid. Is it a masthead? Is it a sculpture? Where is this?
This is a project from the ocean. Hey, what was the name of that? The one one second. The one that I show you. This one, Ocean Restoration, Ocean Rescue Alliance, is a restoration project. It's called 1,000 Mermaids, actually. What they do is that they have friendly reef materials that they build these structures, and they just sink them in different areas pretty much is, I mean, it's a substrate for the reef to grow, but also is this touristic attraction for you to go and dive or snorkel in an area with mermaid sculptures. So yeah, it's called 1000 Mermaids.
Sounds like fun. That's great. Um, so let me ask you about the garbage gyres. Are they considered artificial reefs because they're so close to the surface?
The garbage, which ones?
The gyres that you were talking about earlier?
Like this one, kind of.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they are artificial reefs. No, I mean, not only because they are close to the shore or close to the surface, I mean, but because they have an ecosystem that relies on it, that relies on the area here for shelter, for substrate, for it's like a living space, a living area where they can survive. I don't know if that answers the question.
I think it does. It's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So can you kind of tell us where along the west coast of Mexico that where these coral reefs are? So if we were coming to visit them, where would we be?
In Mexico, on the west coast, on the Pacific side, we have coral communities in in the Baja Peninsula, in all the Baja Peninsula, all the Gulf of California. We have different areas. Actually, there's a very interesting area called Cabo Pulmo, like a Pulmo Cape, and they have one of the most of the best preserved is the coral reef area, and that is because they ban pretty much any fishery around the area. They started like this intensive reforestation of coral, to put it on a way, and now they are only focusing on ecotourism, diving, snorkeling, kayaking. It's the tourism that doesn't affect directly the, like, not these big cruise ships or big party boats, but small boats, even small the row boats to take you closer to the reef. So it's a very amazing place. It's the Cabo Pulmo in Baja California. So pretty much like all that Gulf of California area. In Puerto Vallarta, for example, that's the one I will go. The Marietas Island, a lot of areas there. The Los Arcos Marine Park. If you go a little bit south on Oaxaca, Chiapas, we don't really have that much amount of reefs because the waters there are not so clear, and the seabed is a little bit deeper. So we cannot find as many coral reefs as in these other areas going north. Of course, the best place is always the Yucatan Peninsula. This area with the Caribbean waters is where we have the second largest coral reef barrier of the world, the Mesoamerican reef. So pretty much those would be like the spots in Mexico to go and check on the coral reefs.
Do you know if does that have? Do we have trips in that area? Do we go see the coral reefs when we're there?
Not yet. Hopefully we can have some soon.
Gotcha. Thank
Not
you,
yet.
Melissa.
Yes. But let me tell you, we do have like snorkeling activities in the Galapagos, and Galapagos has one of the richest coral reef areas, rocky reefs areas, actually. So keep your eyes on Galapagos, guys. Also.
That's a good point. They are quite beautiful down there. I've had the pleasure of actually being there and seeing them. So you are 100% correct. Well, Melissa, unfortunately, that is going to be the last question that we do have for today. So I'd like to throw it back to you for your closing comments.
Yes, thank you. Well, as I always say, remember we are all part of nature, and I wanted to show you this, how interconnected the coral reef or the reefs are with everything around them, the ocean, but not only the ocean, also land. So whatever you do back home, it can have an impact. So you need to think if it's a good impact or a bad impact to the rest of the world. So just keep curious with this. Check the resources we have, and thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Rob.
And thank you, Melissa, for having a big impact on us today.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to thank everyone who joined us today. So if you are interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, please give us a call at 800-543-8917, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on the website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. So long, everybody. We'll see you next time.